Think about the books that I love, and if I could read them over and over in different ways, and how cool that would be. Why doesn't literary fiction use this interactive element? And so it was something in the back of my head that was like, that would be cool to do. What do people believe women to be? What makes women who they are? How does that impact the choices we make? The choices we're given, are those really our own choices? Raising Women is a book that knows you. It knows all your secrets. It knows all the thoughts you've had. It knows what choices you've made, as well as the choices you'd change if you could go back and be a teenage girl again. You get to reread it. You don't read it and finish it and think, wow, I can never read that for the first time again. You can reread it for the first time 24 times, and each time you read it, you learn new secrets about these characters that you didn't know the other times you read it.
Welcome to Stories and Stanza. I am your host, Obro. I am a poet and I created this podcast to bring you a montage of real stories that make life beautiful as poetry. Some stories are my own and some are from the wonderful people who have chosen to join me as guests and bring their incredible journey. Stories include a creator's passion or unfolding branches of human emotions in the face of failure, or unfamiliar chapters from the past that remind us about the richness and vastness of life. Embark on a voyage of exploration, contemplation, and motivation with me. Please join me in welcoming today's guest speaker. Hi, Shannon. Welcome to Stories and Stanza.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to hear about your writing journey and your book. So, for our listeners, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. So I am Shannon Waite. I teach English and creative writing in Detroit, Michigan, United States. And what we'll be talking about, Raising Women, is my first novel. I write primarily short stories, but this was really fun for me to get to dive into and write.
I call this part of the podcast In Author's Chair, and I talk to writers about their inspiration, their discipline, and their challenges. Mainly focus in these areas, and it gives the writers an opportunity to know about others' work as well. Like when they get involved as a part of the podcast, and recently it's becoming popular with many writers. So I feel that yeah, more and more writers feel that this is a platform that they can come and share about their book. So let's start by talking about the book and what the book is called. And I always request my guests to share something from the book, read something from the book.
Yeah. So my book is called Raising Women, which was inspired by a few things. I have a document where whenever I get ideas, whether it's titles or lines or plot points, I just kind of add it to this document so that when I don't know what to write, conveniently, I have a list of things I want to write right there. And so for probably the last year, I had been thinking about the choose your own adventure brand, interactive fiction, and how primarily that brand specifically is for children, and it's written as if it's a game. And I thought, what about literary fiction? Like, think about the books that I love, and if I could read them over and over in different ways, and how cool that would be. And why doesn't literary fiction use this interactive element? And so it was something in the back of my head that was like, that would be cool to do. But like I said, primarily I write short stories. And so I didn't have plans to do it. It was just a cool idea. And then this last December, I I wanted to write something, and I was playing with the idea of an interactive novel. And I looked at this document and saw the title Raising Women, and I was like, I know what I'm doing. And I just wrote. Well, first I planned. It was very important to plan the different pathways because interactive fiction, if you don't know, is not linear. You go down and at the end of the section, you choose what the character does next and you hop to different pages based on that. And so I planned that out and then in 2 weeks I wrote most of it. Took about 2 months off, came back and finished it, and then spent the last couple of months just revising and editing and fixing it up. But this is probably the most me thing that I've ever written and was so much fun. And the style really lent itself to how I write. And even though it's the length of a novel, writing these sections made it feel like like writing short stories. So it ended up being a lot of fun for me to write. And so it was inspired by the title and the form, and then everything else just kind of came from that.
It's a very interesting setup. I'm not across the interactive fiction idea. So do you create something like a flowchart of you go here and then there are decision points and you can go to different parts of the book?
Yeah, so I have a map. There's two ways you can do it. There's a more linear way where you've got like your first part that you start reading, and then at the end you've got, two or three choices, and then from those you've got two choices, and from those, and you could just kind of go down like that. I didn't do it that way. I did it where I had my first choice, three choices, and then different choices from those, but like a choice over here might also be a choice over here. And so there's 24 possible pathways you could read with four possible ends. And so there's a lot of things that overlap in different possible pathways. And then there's pathways where you won't ever read some of those sections also. So I had to have this chart. And so what it was I just wrote down the main plot points for each section. So I had like what the first couple pages was going to be about. And then I drew 3 lines and had like what those three different things, like wrote a 1 sentence summary of what that was about, and then figured out what the options from there would be and wrote a 1 sentence summary. And I had to label them all with like numbers and letters. And because when you're writing, you don't have pages to jump to. You can't say jump to page 18 because page 18 is going to be page 30 next week after you add stuff and change stuff. And so I had to label sections as like 1A, 1B, 1C, so that I could keep track of where sections were. And then finally, once everything was done and formatted, I could fill in stuff with pages.
So with the same characters, there are multiple endings.
Yes, there's 4 possible endings you could read, which was so much fun. I'm a very indecisive person, which is why I loved getting to do this, because writing one novel and having to pick one story and one ending is a hard decision for me because I don't know how to pick one thing. So I'm like, this is great. I don't have to. I can pick 4 things or 10 things. However, writing endings is hard. So by the time I got to writing 4 endings, I was like, oh, great. This is a lot of work. But after a lot of revisions, it was very rewarding and I'm very happy with my endings. But yeah, so there's 24 possible stories you could read, and all of those end with 4 possible endings.
I like that. That's something very new for me. So can you read something from your book for our listeners?
Yes, so I will read the first section. So this is the very beginning of the book, and then it presents you with the 3 choices at the end that you have to make. You and Roman are 2 girls eating donuts you grab from the self-serve station at the grocery store while you walk around, window shopping for things you'll never buy. Roman has pink frosting and sprinkles smeared across her bottom lip as she picks up a pair of combat boots with the hand that's not holding the donut. You stop. She looks them over, then drops them on the floor, not where she grabbed them from, and keeps going. Sometimes you forget that Roman is actually a woman. She's 21 or 22. You met her at a gas station where, out of nowhere, she leaned herself against your car at the pump and asked you where you buy your hair dye. Her hair was pulled straight back, tied with one of those twist ties that come on the plastic bread bag. You just told her you don't. It's natural. She told you it's beautiful. She introduced herself. She was eating Cheetos out of a bag, had orange fingers. She licked her fingers clean and tried shaking your hand. She asked you about your favorite band. Then she asked you what you'd sing at karaoke night. You don't sing, so you were not sure. She told you she'd sing Duran Duran's Hungry Like the Wolf and asked again what you'd sing. You thought of Smells Like Teen Spirit because Nirvana played right before you got out of your car. You wouldn't sing that, though, because the real lyrics sound like misheard lyrics. They don't make sense. Then she told you you'd go out and sing that together sometime soon. Roman's charismatic. She told you that you'd been at the pump for a while and asked if you were done yet. You didn't know how to tell her that you finished pumping 5 minutes ago. Instead, you asked how she got there. She laughed. Her laugh is contagious. She got into your car. She told you almost immediately that she just recently gotten out of prison, not that long ago. This didn't really matter to you, though. Roman didn't feel threatening, even after knowing she'd been released from prison. She felt exciting. Without you even asking, she told you that her jail time was for possession. She let her words sit for a moment, left you there on a cliffhanger, and, like a joke, she finished the punchline. For possession, and intent to distribute 500 grams or more of cocaine. She told you that was silly. She was never going to distribute it. That would have meant giving it all away. But it got her 36 months in the slammer. You hadn't been looking for a friend, but you never had much of a choice in the matter either. Once Roman decided something, that was it. Maybe she knew something you didn't. So now she's loitering aisles with you. This has been a frequent pastime as you get to know each other. She's always got something she needs to grab. You place the last bite of donut in your mouth as you pass the milk aisle. Rows of whole milk, 2% fat milk, skim milk, soy milk. Roman has told you soy milk doesn't even need to be refrigerated before it's opened. It has a shelf life unopened of up to 1 year. You both kept walking, browsing. You pass the alcohol aisle, past the cleaning supplies, past the jewelry. It's like some sort of domestic roadshow. You pause just a minute to stare at a diamond ring enclosed in the glass case, and Roman slaps your arm. She tells you things aren't real. Nothing you see really exists, she says. Roman is full of advice. You ask how, why. She says reality is never the same. It's always changing. So how are things like rings real then if they aren't changing like reality does? She adds that reality is something we make. She picks a scab off her knuckle and lets it bleed. She's got a few more scabs up her arms. She hasn't cut her long, dirty blonde hair for at least 3 years, and it flutters against her cheekbones as the wind from someone walking by blows it around. You've got something on your lip, you say to her. She licks the frosting and thanks you. When you first met, you asked her how long she'd been out of prison for. She told you she didn't know. Now you don't even know how long ago that was. She did tell you, though, about how the government wants to be in your life, but not because they care about you. They just want to control you. They're like your parents. They don't give a shit. It's all about control and how they look. Yes, of course it hurts. She said that when they told her in prison that her time was up, she was free. There was no plan in place for where she'd go. She was just supposed to. Go, that is. Somewhere. Anywhere. It's one of the ways people create reality, by letting the things they don't like leave their peripherals. Then it no longer exists. To exist means to be acknowledged in some way. This is why you throw decomposing meat, moldy sourdough, and snot-dried tissues in the trash. Someone will take it somewhere else, a place you don't have to see. And then it's gone. That's how that works. The prison pushed her out their doors and into their peripherals. They said, go. She served her time. So is she even real? Her boobs vibrate. She digs her fist into her wife beater and pulls out a phone. It's the man who picked her up from prison calling her. He's asking where she's been. She's not sure. She's sorry. Maybe she knows, but she might be wrong. She couldn't find her way back. She will be there soon. She promises. Yes, her promise means something. Last night was an accident. Sorry, the last 3 nights were accidents. The phone died. She needed a charger. She found a charger. Now it's alive. She can come home. XOXO. She pulls 2 suckers from the shelf closet to the closest to the exit and shoves them in her phone back in her bra. Since you've met, she's been on and off living with the guy who told her to get in his car when prison let her free at 2 o'clock in the morning. She didn't really have any other option. Besides, he had a dry nose and a bloodstain above his mouth. Just how she liked it. Roman's nose has a cluster of salted freckles around it. They might be real. They might be tattoos. You don't know. But she scratches at them constantly. She glances sideways at you and raises her thumb up to your mouth so she can wipe some sprinkles off your top lip. You don't ask if you're going to pay for the donuts. The alarm does not buzz when you leave. You're only 16. She asks you, "Can I take you to the church I stayed at last night?" Which really means she's asking if you'll take her to the church she stayed at last night. She doesn't have a car. She can't drive, so you're the one who takes you to around. She just got out of prison, and now she needs something like a mother. You need something else. You consider telling her yes, turn to page 7, or no, you two could just go back to your place, turn to page 13, or that you'll drop her off halfway since the halfway point is on your own way home. Turn to page 17.
Wow. That's really cool. It's really clever writing and was building that moment so well that it draws the uh, reader into the scene, like all the visuals coming in and beautiful. And yeah, something very unique that I've come across. So
Thank you.
wonderful. And you said that you got inspired by the idea of games to structure the book this way?
So interactive fiction is really well known from the brand Choose Your Own Adventure, uh, which you can't call it because that is a brand name. And Choose Your Own Adventure is written almost game-like. So I wanted to take literary fiction and turn it into interactive. Whereas Choose Your Own Adventure, you've got like a paragraph or two for each section before you jump to another one. And it's not meant to develop like a well-developed story. It's meant to just see where it takes you and what wild things come up, what monkeys come from the mansion, and what robots are gonna try and attack you, and uh, what wild ending you can get to, and can you get to the one winning ending? It's set up more like a game, and I mean, adults can read it, but it's marketed to children. And um, so I wanted to take that interactive idea. A lot of video games are interactive fiction. A lot of video games where you have to make the decisions on where you go and where it takes you. And so I wanted to take that and turn it into more of a literary fiction style.
And when you came up with the idea, like who was your target audience?
So I love that you asked that because my target audience here is women, more specifically unhinged millennial women, or millennial women that like unhinged women stories. And I've struggled with this because the audience could seem like young adult because the reader's being put in the shoes of a teenage girl. And um, so that already like seems young adult. And it's very much a coming of age story. So that seems young adult. And there's these elements that seem young adult. But I'm writing it for women who are going to be like, I know that girl. I know the people that she's hanging out with. Like, those were the ones that I grew up with. And I've had a couple of readers say that to me. And that's the best compliment that I could get, is that I recognize these girls because that's what I wanted. And so, well, yes, like teenagers could read it. Yes, anybody could read it. Who I was writing this for was specifically millennial women who are going to be like, I get that. Like, I feel commiserated with. Like, I made those decisions, or I know girls who made those decisions or ended up in that situation. And so that was my intended audience.
That's interesting. And uh, like you have the layers of like interaction and relatability, but did you want to convey any message underneath that layers, like that you really wanted the readers to resonate with?
Yeah, so the two main themes that I explore in the book is the idea of womanhood and identity. And so you'll see this idea of reality come up throughout the book, which gets addressed briefly here in the beginning. And this idea of like what do people believe women to be? What makes women who they are? How does that impact the choices we make? The choices we're given, are those really our own choices? It was fun playing with the interactive element because um, it also ties into these themes that are in the book and thinking about like, are these really your choices anyways? You know, you're given choices and then what do you do with them? And there's a couple different endings that could happen, but there's still only four endings that could happen. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
um interesting how the form was able to play into these themes too. But yeah, so it really dives into this idea of like what we consider women to be, how we define them, how they are raised and become who they become, and was that their choice or not?
Is there any review or any testimonial that you received on the book that you can share on the podcast?
Absolutely. Actually, I just received one today. Let me pull up. So this is from Rebecca Jones Howe, who's the author of Vile Men and then also Ending in Ashes. She said, Raising Women is a book that knows you. It knows all your secrets. It knows all the thoughts you've had. It knows what choices you've made, as well as the choices you'd change if you could go back and be a teenage girl again. It knows that sometimes a little self-discovery is the scariest thing of all.
Great review, and that too from a fellow writer. That's that's interesting. So we have talked about the book, the inspiration, the plot line. In the next section, I'd like to hear from you, as in what is your discipline of writing. So we'll talk about, for example, what was your research and how did you write the book, and what how was your publishing journey, editing journey, that sort of things. Okay. So first, tell us, you briefly touched upon the subject, how you wrote it. So do you want to share anything about your writing discipline, like having the idea and then, going through that writing process and editing process and getting the book ready?
Yeah, so uh like I said, I started it mid late December and I knocked most of it out over a couple of weeks. Then there were about 2 months I took off from it, and then I went back and in another week or a couple of weeks I finished it. I've got 3 degrees. Last year, this past year, actually, this summer, I finished my third degree in creative writing. It was a second BA in creative writing. And so I was doing that. I had a fiction workshop class in the fall and a fiction workshop class in the winter. This wasn't for either of those classes, but I spent this last year just writing a ton and really focused on my writing for those classes. And so I think that that was helpful. Like when I wrote most of this, I had just finished the fall semester and my one fiction workshop. And so I was like, yeah, I'm writing a ton, I'm ready to go. And so I just sat down and knocked it out over a couple of weeks because I was really in that mood. Um, and then my next class started up, which is why I took the break for a little bit. And then when that class was about to finish is when I kind of went back and revisited it and finished it. Um, but I was just really excited about it. And because of how much planning I had to do, it made it a lot easier to knock out that first draft because I had all the different sections planned. And I went back and added things or removed things or changed things, but knocking out the first draft because of how much planning I had to get down was relatively easy. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I loved it. Like I said, it's the most me thing I've written, and I felt passionate about it, but there's so many non-traditional elements in it that I had a hard time thinking I'd find a traditional publisher for it because it doesn't have a traditional form. It has transgressive topics in there like statutory rape and cocaine usage and things like that. It just has all these different things that aren't traditional. And there's some small presses that maybe would have liked it, but you submit it and you wait for how long, and then maybe they say no, and then you do it again. And so I wasn't sure. And then in May, I decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to publish it. I'm going to independently publish it. And when I decide I'm going to do something, that's it. It's going to happen. And most of my big decisions have been, it's funny, I'm a planner, which is why this was a great thing to write because I had to plan. But when it comes to the big decisions in my life, it's always been I'm gonna do this thing, and then I do it, and it ends up being great, but they aren't planned. And so this is one of those things. A friend of mine actually photographs books, book covers, and so I was talking to her, and I said, "Hey, could we do the photo shoot for this cover?" And she said, "Yeah." And so I know some designers through her, and I know different marketing things because of this. And so in May, we made plans to shoot the cover in July. And so June, I did a whole bunch of planning and organizing. We shot in July, started doing my cover and interior design with those wonderful ladies in July. And from there, it was just, all right, get my ISBNs, get, things set up on the different platforms I'm going to sell it. What are my marketing techniques going to be? How am I going to build an audience? And I just, uh, started doing all these different things to start marketing it, and it releases October 11th, so I got 1 month. But yeah, it's just kind of been this whirlwind of just, I don't know, lots
Yeah.
of excitement and passion and planning and hoping for the best.
And you are already a writer before you wrote this book, and you are a writing teacher as well. So I can be a lot easy for you to be in the preparation and planning. But is there anything you'd like to highlight there, like as from a fiction writer, from a short fiction to a full book? How did that path look like? Was there any other research or any other preparation that you'd like to share with us?
Absolutely. So, like I said, for me, the big part was planning. Um, I tried writing novels when I was younger because in my head, that's if you're a writer, that's what you do. Because when I was younger, all I read was novels and um, didn't work. This worked because of the planning. I know some people like to pants it or like just write and see where it goes. I would never be able to do that. And so what helped me was figuring out what was going to happen, where it was going to go, and how. And especially with this type of book, you absolutely have to do that because you need to know what pathways are going where for it to work. Otherwise, you're gonna be super confused. So that was my first thing that helped was just I have a whole like I have a flow chart that I wrote out and I highlighted sections when I was done writing them and kept track of that. Um, Research that I did, I wanted this, like I said, to feel like my readers recognized themselves and the girls they grew up with in it. So I pulled out my old yearbook and, took inspiration from notes that people wrote in that. I looked at um, live journals my friends and acquaintances and friends of friends wrote. If you're not familiar with LiveJournal, it was just like an online blog journal that, back in the 2000s was super popular among the teenage girls that were emerging on the internet. And we just spilled our guts in these online journals. And it's incredible how much insight into the lives of teen girls, like they are, what do you call it when you put like memories in like a box and you bury it to pull it back up? Can't think of
Yeah,
the
I
word.
understand. It's
But it's just like you open this thing and you're
time
like,
capsule, I think.
time, yes, yes, it's like a time capsule. Like it brings me back, 20 years ago to like these lives. And so reading through my old entries and like my best friend's old entries and just reminding myself of like the things that we did when we were that age. Uh, that research was super helpful. Reading books by writers who were writing similar things. So my book, like I said, could seem like young adult. My intended audience is not young adults. Uh, but I had a lot of people who don't read this genre that were like, oh, this is young adult. But there's a lot of books out there that are coming of age about girls growing up where it's very clearly not meant for a young adult audience. And so reading those books, rereading them, looking at the craft choices that those writers were making to carry into mine. Because in my revisions, I went through and made sure I cleaned up my tone so that it didn't feel too like much like it was directed at teens, because that isn't my intended audience. I don't care if they read it, but that's not who I'm writing for. And so reading a lot to kind of be inspired in like stylistic choices was a big part of this. And yeah, I'd say the planning, the revisiting the the types of people that I was writing about, and then reading authors whose language and voice inspired me, were probably the three biggest things I did in terms of like planning.
That's really great. And uh, were there any challenges while you were working through it? Something that you're not prepared for,
Hmm.
or anything that you could have done differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know about done differently, but I think my biggest challenge in this was second guessing myself and doubting what I wrote and feeling like it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And part of that is because I got some feedback from people who weren't my audience. Not everybody's going to be your audience, right? I read, I write, I teach reading and writing. There are a million books in the world I don't ever want to read, I'm not interested in. But there are people who love those books, right? And so, like, I am not the audience, but there is an audience for them. And so I know that not everyone's going to love my book, and that's okay with me. But I had a couple of people who were not my audience give me negative feedback about it, which made me question everything and be like, is this even good? Is this trash? Is this what I want it to be? Is it actually young adult? That's not what I'm trying to write. And um, really got to me. And so I used the feedback to go back and, like I said, revise the tone to make sure that it sounded more like what I wanted it to sound like to help eliminate the audience um confusion. I uh fixed up spots that weren't really doing what I wanted them to do. It made me revise it a lot. um which was good because I feel like this is so much more what it needed to be and what I wanted it to be. Um, but that was probably my biggest challenge is spending the last 3 months wondering if this is what it's meant to be. But I'm feeling so much more confident in it now. My readers who like are intended to read this are really enjoying it and connecting with it. And so I know that it is doing what I want it to do now. But that was really hard, doubting my writing and what I was going to put in the world.
Yes, I think every writer goes through that phase in one
Yeah.
way or the other. I remember my first poetry book that I published, and I was ready with it, but I kept that for in the shelf for 2 years. And then one of my friends read it and kind of suggested that you go ahead with publishing. I mean, the writers that I speak to, everyone has that element of doubt, I guess, in one
Yeah.
form or the other. So, uh, you're teaching writing, and you have done all these qualifications on writing. So, how do you see yourself in future? What are the next steps as a writer or creator?
I'm so excited. I got so many plans. So, I actually have a short story that is being published in a literary mag, also actually 2 days before Raising Women releases. But so I've got some short things that are coming out. But also, I'm really excited about a couple of books I've got planned for the future. So we've got Raising Women, which is this interactive novel. And I fell in love with these characters I was writing and didn't feel like they were done. And so, because interactive fiction really is rooted in this like game element, like I said, the Choose Your Own Adventure brand is set up like a game. Uh, Video games use the interactive element. And so I continued on with that, and I will be in the summer publishing a sequel. I don't know if you could call it a sequel, but it is going to be a collection of short stories called The Women that I am considering an expansion pack. So, getting familiar with games, expansion packs are like additional parts to a game you can buy that just expand it. So, like, I grew up playing the Sims and Roller Coaster Tycoon. And you could buy expansion packs so you could have pets now for your Sims characters that you couldn't have with just the main game. Or you could have this new type of roller coaster that the main game didn't give you. And you just, buy all these other CDs that the company sells so you can add all these extra things to your game that you didn't have before. And so that's what this collection of short stories will be. It's going to be a whole bunch of short stories that focus on the women in Raising Women. And so they'll expand on things that get mentioned in Raising Women that don't ever like really get explained. So like in Raising Women, you never see Roman actually like leaving jail. You just hear that she left jail at 2 in the morning and some guy picked her up. But in the expansion pack, you're gonna get a story of her being released from jail and how she ended up going home with the guy that picked her up. And then there'll be other stories that don't get mentioned in Raising Women that just kind of expand on these girls. But uh yeah, it's a collection of short stories that just specifically tells you more about the lives of these women that you see in the novel. And so that's the next thing. And then after I get that out next summer, I already have a plan for another interactive novel. It's not mapped out yet, but I've got a whole bunch of like plot ideas for it that are added to my document of ideas that once I finish with this Raising Women franchise I've got going on here, I can kind of move into that next book.
Wonderful. And I wish you all the best for all the future books. I think we have covered all the areas that I wanted to talk to you about. To conclude our podcast today, is there anything you'd like to say to your readers and on the listeners of our show?
Yeah, no, I am super excited about this book. Like I said, it feels like the most me thing I've written. I am happy to put it in the hands of readers and let them read it in many different ways and think of it in many different ways. That's what I wanted this type of book to be, is you get to reread it. You don't read it and finish it and think, wow, I can never read that for the first time again. You can reread it for the first time 24 times, and each time you read it, you learn new secrets about these characters that you didn't know the other times you read it. And so I think that's really cool. It can be right now pre-ordered as an ebook on Amazon. It will be available in like Barnes and Noble and some other places as well in the near future. A complete package can be pre-ordered from my website, which includes a signed copy of the paperback, 4 stickers, and a Polaroid that was taken for the book specifically. And so, um, yeah, I'm just excited to get this into the hands of readers.
Wonderful. And I'm sure the readers will love this book. And thank you for taking the time to talk to Stories and Stanza today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.